Testing 1, 2. This is a interview with Brendan Kiernan. Today's date is October the 23rd, 2010. Brendan is 84 years of age, looking very young. We are driving on the M50, coming back from what's the name of the place?
Lunch in the Leopardstown Inn.
Leopardstown Inn, heading back to Portmarnock. So Brendan, when you look back at your life, what would you say the very earliest memory you have is?
Been taken to have my photograph taken when I was only about 2 years of age, and having to sit on a table in the photographer's, a marble top table with no clothes on, and my frozen. But that was the procedure in those days. You sat very discreetly naked and had your photograph taken. And my parents wanted to cut my long curly hair and have me looking more like a normal boy. So they said, we'll have his photograph taken with the long hair, and then you go for the haircut. But that's my earliest memory. And one of my great memories was when I was a little bit older, and I was about 7 or 8. A friend of my father's, Christy Nolan. Christy Nolan, I used to call him Uncle. I don't know, my parents maybe thought I should, but I called him Uncle, but he wasn't. He was really just a friend of my father's. But he came one Easter when I was 7 or 8 years of age, and he had an Easter egg for me that was as big as a football. And I've never before or since seen anything as big, and has stayed in my mind and will remain in my mind as the most unexpected gift to ever receive from somebody other than your own family. It was a ginormous Easter egg, and literally it was as big as a football. That was another nice memory from my childhood. Another memory was when I was about 8, I think. My father was buying me a bicycle, and it meant going into the city from Drumcondra, where we lived, to get the bike. And my father let me cycle back home from the city centre to Drumcondra, which was about 2 miles. And he was literally running along beside me, holding the saddle while I was cycling my brand new bicycle. And it was what they used to call then an 18-inch frame. And it would do you until you were about 12 or 14, at which stage you needed a bigger bicycle.
The 24-inch or 26.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They were early memories of mine.
Do you remember the first time you played football?
I don't know. No, I don't remember that. I would have been playing though from a very young age. Maybe when I was 6 or 7, but I remember when I was about 13 or 14, I was playing for junior teams.
Now, when you played football, it was always soccer, right?
Oh yeah, always soccer.
Was there ever any, soccer being an English game and the whole history of Ireland and England, was there ever any resistance to playing soccer, or did people never seem to consider it an English game?
Well, no, in school it was very, it was played widely, regarded as the best football game. But in school, Christian Brothers School like O'Connell's, where I went, they would not be encouraging soccer. They were, encouraging Gaelic games, and it was Gaelic football. But some of the other schools would encourage rugby, which was, wasn't an Irish game. But places like Belvedere and that, they'd have rugby teams as well as Gaelic teams. But O'Connell's, Christian Brothers, all Gaelic football.
And you played actively for many years. You said you started when you were 6 or 7, so, and then you were on regular leagues at age 12.
I played up to the time I was, married. I was never anything kind of special.
What position did you play?
Average. I used to play outside right.
Now, considering that your brother went on to play for the Irish national team and for British teams, did you ever sort of have aspirations to follow suit?
Yes, I would have loved that. I would love to have been a professional footballer playing for a big English team and then playing for my country. But I was very average. I only played for average standard teams here in Dublin.
What would you say was the highlight of your soccer career?
I played one time for a team called Grange Gorman, and I was playing against Shamrock Rovers, and my brother was playing for Shamrock Rovers. I was playing against my brother. I remember that.
Do you remember the score?
He was a goalkeeper. No, I don't. No, I don't.
Who won? Shamrock?
Can't even remember that.
Now, what other games did you play? I do know you played table tennis or ping pong.
I did. I played table tennis, and I used to play competitively for a tennis club called Glenanne, and they were in Terranure. And how I came to be playing for them, although I lived on the north side, was that there was a chap who worked with me, and he was a member in Glenanne, Tom Brown, and he encouraged me to go over and play table tennis in his club. And I did. We used to play against in the winter time, we play against other tennis clubs. And there'd be competitive games,
Didn't you win some awards?
Yeah, I won some things all right for table tennis, but I played lawn tennis as well, but I wasn't any great shakes at the lawn tennis.
Do you think that lawn tennis and table tennis are directly related, or is it a whole other thing?
No, it's different. It's quite different, But a lot of the table tennis is wrist, the skill with your wrist and putting, spin on the ball and that. But you don't do that with lawn tennis.
It's more your arm and
your arm,
and running
and hitting it, cleanly hitting it, and as you said, actively running all over the court.
When you were growing up, did they have pool halls, snooker halls, and were they always considered kind of a seedy thing?
Yeah, they were, and like your parents wouldn't be too happy if they thought you were there because they associated it with smoky atmospheres. And I played a few times with my pals, but no, I didn't. I never particularly liked it, and I certainly didn't like the places where they played.
Now, you used to go swimming too, right?
Yeah, I wasn't much good at the swimming. I found that I hadn't got great tolerance for the cold water.
Because there was no pools then?
There were pools, but not heated pools. So they used to go down to the Clontarf, which was an open-air pool, and the water in it was seawater.
Yeah, they just open it up, let the seawater in, right? And then the tide would go out and the water would stay in.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. That was it. That was exactly it.
So basically it was seawater, only it was in this one area and it was never heated in any way except maybe by the sun?
Never heated, no. As a matter of fact, I remember on one occasion going down with some pals to have a swim in it, and it was a cold day. I remember this now. I can't tell whether it was winter time or not, but it was definitely cold, and the water was freezing, and I was one who couldn't endure the cold water. My fingers used to go numb.
Yeah.
But I do remember also that I dived in with a view to swimming the length of the pool, and halfway across I got into difficulties because I was so cold.
Wow.
Normally I could swim it,
right?
But I got so cold.
What time of the year was it?
Well, that's the thing. I'm not too sure, but I'd say it was late autumn, maybe this time, But certainly, I do remember struggling to get across the other half of the pool and getting out absolutely exhausted and
wow.
kind of relieved that I hadn't drowned.
I mean, you could get pneumonia that way, couldn't you?
You could, yeah.
When you were growing up, you went to school at O'Connell's, where I also went, and
Before
Kenneth.
that, I went to St. Patrick's, Drumcondra. It was primary school.
Did you like that?
Oh yeah, I had nice memories of there, all right, yeah.
But looking back then, you finished school, you went straight out of school, got your first job working with New Ireland, where you worked for your entire life, right up till retirement.
That's
Back
right.
then, how unusual was it? Because I know the statistics say that it was like 1% of them went to college. How unusual was it for people to go to college, and what kind of people went to college? University,
I mean. In a class of, say, 30 pupils, there wouldn't be 10 that would go to college. You might get 5 or 6. And partly due to the fact that people in those days couldn't afford to send you to college. And so there were very few. But also it was considered that your education in the secondary school was sufficient to get you through life. But there were exceptions. Now, I was not an exception because my parents couldn't afford to send me to college.
So was college more like if someone said, I want to be a dentist, or I want to be...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas nowadays they go to college and they, while they're attending college, they're kind of thinking, what would I like to be? You know?
Right. And I would imagine then that the dropout rate probably wasn't as high back then. When someone started college, they continued all the way through.
Well, yeah, but there were some who drop out. I mean, remember Eamon Byrne telling me that his own daughter started, Susan, and after a year and a half she dropped out. But he would laugh about this day. He said that's how she met her husband, and he has a very big job. They're very comfortable, and that's how she met him in the 18 months she was in college. So college was good for her.
And how hard was it to get a job back in those days? Obviously the Irish economy was not the strongest.
Oh, it was very difficult. Very difficult. And it was to get it, which was regarded, we were saying earlier today, a job in the civil service or the bank was very difficult. One, in the bank they wouldn't give you a job unless your parents had a bank account with them. And
Really?
Oh, so I believe. Yeah, I mean, I never could prove that, but that was the talk.
Wow.
But a belief at the time that. But and then on the civil service, it was competitive in as much as there were the famous, every year there were civil service exams, and I did those with a view to being a civil servant. And I remember I got out of maybe 300 or 400 people sitting in the exam, I got 21st place, but I didn't get the job. Why? Because they only had vacancies for 15 people.
Wow.
So 21st was no good.
I remember those actually. The civil service exams was a big deal, wasn't it?
Yeah, big deal.
Do they still do that, do you know?
I don't know. I must ask now. I must ask. But what was I going to say to you? Oh yes, in those days too, that the Dublin Corporation was regarded as a good job, pensionable, secure position. But
So long as you weren't a dustbin man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but in the office it was regarded as a good job. But nowadays, there's never any mention of it in terms of being good employment.
Bless you. Right now we're passing the graveyard where Mum is buried, and
I go in tomorrow.
we'll go to tomorrow. But in terms of Mum, and speaking about jobs and that, back then she worked for a few years after she left school, up till when she got married. How unusual was it for women in the workplace then?
To be working.
To be working.
Oh, well, married women just didn't work in
Just
those
didn't.
days. No. They
So women would work those few years between school and marriage.
Yeah, and some employers wouldn't give a job to a married woman. They'd feel that, she has a husband to provide for her, so we give the job to somebody single. But also, like, husbands in those days would feel, I'm not much of a husband if my wife has to go out to work.
Yeah.
But that began to change around my young years. Even then, it was also the women's salaries were smaller. I mean, at a time when I would have been earning, say, £10 or £12 a week in the New Ireland, a girl the same age, so the same service and all as me, would have about £3 a week less.
Significant.
Yeah.
Now, did anyone ever say, including women, this just doesn't seem fair?
Well, yes, but I don't remember personally hearing it from girls that I worked with. But generally, yes, the unions were fighting for equal pay for the women. But there were unions even back in my day.
And you know, the way there's sort of always a dislike of the government in power by the opposition party. Were things always like that in Ireland?
Oh, always. If the government said it's a fine day, isn't it? The opposition would, try and find some way to discredit the government, say, how could they got it so wrong? It's not a great day. Look at this. There's been a shower.
Yeah. And now,
I'm being funny, but that's oppositions are there for, putting the government down, I suppose, showing up their weaknesses.
Well, it's human nature, and along those same lines, you know how so many people are always complaining, saying, "Oh, things were better before," or the economy is down and we're going through a bad time. Was it always like that? Were people always sort of complaining about things not being as good as they should be economically?
No, I don't remember that, but I do remember there was a little bit of a recession. Well, they talk about the recession in the 80s, but I would have been working then, and I don't really remember it as a recession as such. I really don't. But they talk about it so.
Well, what about like in the 40s or the 50s?
Well, during the war years, I was only a boy. But I know my father was unemployed, and the reason he was unemployed was because of the war. That there's no need for a lot of things during the war because people are struggling just to survive.
And
my father was unemployed for I can't say for how long exactly, but it seemed a long time. It might have been about a year or 18 months, and there were difficult times then, money-wise. And then he had to, he got a job, which was a different line of business. He had been in the printing business, and how he came to be out of work was that he was head of the printing section of Eason's. They're still there, Eason's, but in those days they had their own factory, and they
published their own books.
Published all their own stuff, printed all their school books and copybooks, everything like that. And they employed, a lot of people. I'd say there was 100 people or more employed. And my father was the general manager. But they closed the factory down because business wasn't good. And my father was out of a job.
And in the years after the Second World War, did the Irish economy pick up greatly?
It did, but yes, it did. Because I can remember, I would have started work just after the war, and the New Ireland where I worked were recruiting a lot of staff because there was a great, need for extra staff because the company that I went to, New Ireland, was regarded as it was totally Irish, and they used to kind of sell the idea that if you do your insurance business with New Ireland, you're doing it with a totally Irish company, because in those days all the other companies were English who had branches here just, and the different branches, the different insurance companies, the Britannia and the Prudential and all those, they decided that they didn't want to do business any longer in Ireland, and the government said, well, look, we'll form set up a company, we'll call it Irish Life, and we'll take over all your policy holders, and we'll continue to collect from them, and we'll honour the payments, the claims and all that on it. And there was some kind of a cash deal done for all that. And the Irish Life was formed. So the Irish Life then started to write what they called new business, and new business would be in the name of Irish Life, whereas the other stuff, they would have had their he's here still. The others would have had their policies with names like Prudential on them, or Britannia, or any of those kind of English companies.
Okay. Thanks, Brenny.
You're welcome. You bring in the paper.